Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. I always make sure to say that little intro before I start. It's a small habit, but for some reason, it helps me gather my thoughts. But today, I don't even know where to begin. There's just so much to say, so much to process, and it feels like everything is just bubbling over. I need to tell you about something that happened, something completely unexpected. It changed everything. You might find it hard to believe, but I promise you it's true. It all started with a knock on my door. I've lived in this same little neighborhood for years, decades, actually. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, where you can count on your neighbors for a friendly wave, a quick chat, or even borrowing a cup of sugar when you're in a pinch. I'm not the type to go knocking on doors or bothering people, especially those I don't know well. But life has a funny way of throwing surprises at you. And this time, that surprise came in the form of my neighbor Ben. Now, Ben isn't someone I ever expected to have much of a connection with. He's about my age, a quiet guy who mostly keeps to himself. He's been living next door for a few years, and while we've exchanged polite greetings in passing, we've never really had a real conversation. But that day, everything changed. I was struggling, more than I had in a long time. Lately, my health had been giving me a hard time. Not the kind of thing people talk about all the time, but serious enough to make me feel weaker than I used to. Getting older is strange. You think you've got everything figured out, and then suddenly, your body starts letting you down in ways you never imagined. I hadn't been out much. The exhaustion was overwhelming, and my joints ached more with each passing day. I remember sitting by the window, staring out at my little garden, wondering if I would ever feel like myself again. But it wasn't just the physical pain. It was the emotional toll, too. I hadn't realized how much I had been isolating myself, pulling away from friends, from family, from the world. And then the knock came. I was sitting there, lost in my thoughts, in my worn-out chair, when I heard it. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated. But then, there it was again, this time, a little louder. I forced myself up, opened the door, and there stood Ben. He looked the same as always, calm, reserved, but there was something different in his expression. He was holding a bag in one hand, and his eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, met mine in a way that made me feel seen. "Hey, Martha," he said, using my name for the very first time. "I thought I'd bring you something. I know you haven't been feeling too great. Recently, something unexpected happened. I wasn't anticipating anyone to notice, but then he was there, standing right in front of me, offering help without a second thought. I hadn't even realized how much I needed someone to acknowledge me, to show that they cared. It hit me harder than I expected. "What's this?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though the lump in my throat made it difficult. Ben held out a bag. "Just a little something to help," he said. "I was making a batch of soup for myself, and thought you might need some too. It's nothing fancy, just homemade chicken broth, a bit of salt, and some vegetables. I figured it might help with recovery." I blinked, caught off guard by his kindness. It was just soup, nothing extravagant, but it was more than I had expected. I hadn't been cooking much lately, too drained to prepare anything. Most days, I couldn't even bring myself to think about food. "Thank you, Ben," I said, my voice unsteady. I didn't know what else to say. He nodded, his smile still there but tinged with seriousness. "You've been a little quiet lately. If you ever need anything, someone to talk to, or just a bit of company, don't hesitate to knock. We're neighbors, after all." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, holding the bag of soup. My heart felt full, yet a storm of emotion swirled inside me. Gratitude, surprise, and even a hint of shame. How had I let myself become so closed off, so distant? I had family, friends, yet I had been withdrawing from them. Ben's simple act of kindness made me realize just how far I had drifted from everything that mattered. I stepped inside and sat down at the table, the bag of soup still in my hands. I wasn't sure if it was the warmth of the soup or the unexpected kindness that filled me, but suddenly, the world didn't feel so cold anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about what Ben had said, about how he had noticed me, even when I hadn't noticed myself. How often do we go through life, so absorbed in our struggles that we fail to see the people around us? That night, I realized just how much I had been missing out on. Maybe it was time to start paying attention, to really see the world again. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about Ben more and more. He had opened something in me that I hadn't even realized was closed. It wasn't just about the soup. It was about someone reaching out, without judgment, without expecting anything in return. It felt like a door had been left slightly ajar, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so alone. But little did I know, this was just the beginning. Ben's simple act of kindness would lead to something far greater, something that would change everything for both of us. After Ben's visit, something shifted. I wouldn't say I was suddenly healed, not even close, but the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. I started noticing things I had been ignoring for a long time. It wasn't just about the soup. It was about the reminder that someone cared, that someone had noticed me when I had stopped noticing myself. That small gesture made me think about the past few years, about the connections I had let slip away, the quiet isolation I had settled into, and how I had gradually faded into the background. I started seeing Ben more often after that. Nothing dramatic, just a wave from across the yard, a quick chat about the weather, or a few words exchanged while taking out the trash. But there was something different now. An unspoken understanding had formed between us, a quiet connection that pulled us a little closer each day. Then, a few days after Ben had brought me the soup, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in my favorite chair by the window, watching the golden light of the setting sun spill into the room. Physically, I was feeling better. The fatigue had eased, and the aches were more manageable. But my mind was restless, filled with questions I didn't yet have answers to. I heard the knock again. This time, I wasn't surprised. In fact, I had almost expected it. The idea that someone cared enough to check on me felt like a lifeline in the middle of all the uncertainty. I stood up, smoothing out the wrinkles in my worn-out sweater, and walked to the door. And there he was again, Ben, standing with a small basket of fruit in his hands, a relaxed smile on his face. "I thought you might like something fresh," he said, his voice calm but steady. "Picked up a few things from the market, some good stuff in here. Apples, pears, even a couple of peaches." I took the basket from him, feeling overwhelmed by his kindness once more. "Thank you, Ben. You really don't have to keep bringing me things." Ben just shrugged, a modest smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I know, but I want to. I don't mind." Then, after a short pause, he added, "You've been kind of quiet lately. I figured maybe you could use a little cheering up." I nodded, not sure how to respond. There was something comforting about his words, a warmth that made me feel less invisible, less alone. But then, as I stood there holding the basket, something in Ben's expression shifted. His eyes grew more serious, his posture just a little stiffer. "Martha," he said gently, his voice quieter now, "I don't mean to pry, but are you okay? I mean, really?" The question caught me off guard. I had spent so much time pretending everything was fine, hiding behind polite smiles, that I hadn't even realized how much I'd been avoiding the truth, both about my health and about myself. Ben was the first person in a long time to look me in the eye and really ask if I was okay. I hesitated. The truth felt too tangled, too difficult to put into words. So instead of answering right away, I stepped aside. "Do you want to sit for a while?" I was about to make some tea. Ben nodded and stepped inside. For a moment, we were just two people sharing a quiet, ordinary space. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, the simple routine grounding me in the present moment. As the water heated, we sat in my small kitchen, our conversation drifting to lighter topics, the neighborhood, the weather, everyday small talk. But beneath it all, I could still feel the weight of his question lingering, unspoken but not forgotten. After a long pause, I finally admitted, "I don't know." My voice was softer than I'd meant it to be. "I think I've been struggling more than I've let myself admit, even to myself. It's not just the physical stuff, it's everything. The isolation, the feeling like I'm just fading into the background." I looked down at my hands, not sure what else to say. I didn't realize how much I've been avoiding it all. And honestly, it's hard to talk about. Ben didn't rush to fill the silence. He just sat there, listening, his face thoughtful. There was no judgment in his eyes, no discomfort, just quiet patience, like he was simply there to listen, to be present, and somehow, that in itself felt like a gift. After a while, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady. "You don't have to go through this alone, Martha." I glanced up at him. "I know it's not easy," he continued. "I can see that. But sometimes, just talking, even a little, can make a difference. You don't have to hide or pretend. I'm here." His words, so simple and honest, settled over me like warmth on a cold day. And in that moment, I realized just how much I had needed to hear them. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words. How much it meant to know that someone truly cared enough to say them out loud. There's something powerful about feeling seen, really seen, in a way that goes beyond the surface. Ben had done that for me. He had recognized the parts of myself that I had been hiding, even from me. And instead of judgment, he had offered understanding, without expecting anything in return. The moment lingered between us, heavy with emotions I couldn't quite put into words. But I didn't have to. Ben's quiet presence was enough. We didn't need to rush, didn't need to fill the silence with unnecessary words. We could simply exist in that moment, without pressure or expectations. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about him helping me. It was about something more. He was giving me a chance to reconnect, to rediscover a part of myself that had been buried for far too long. Something inside me shifted. It was subtle, but undeniable. A flicker of possibility. A feeling I hadn't allowed myself to embrace in a long time. What had started as a small act of kindness was turning into something deeper, something meaningful. It wasn't just about Ben bringing me soup or fruit. It was about the way he had opened a door I hadn't even realized was closed. But even as I let myself open up to him, I still didn't know where this was headed. What I did know was that something had changed, not just within me, but within him too. And that change was only the beginning. In the days following our last conversation, there was a calmness between us. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from avoidance, but rather an unspoken understanding. We didn't immediately talk about what had happened. In fact, we didn't talk about much at all. But something was different. There was a shift in the air, a quiet awareness that hadn't been there before. I started looking forward to seeing him more than I expected. Maybe it was gratitude for his kindness, or maybe it was something more. I wasn't sure yet, but every time our paths crossed, my heart picked up its pace, just a little. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something, a growing connection, a bond that felt both comforting and unsettling at the same time. There were moments when I'd catch myself watching him, wondering what lay behind those kind eyes and gentle gestures. And then, one evening it happened. I had spent the entire day in my garden, tending to my flowers, which had been struggling under the intense summer sun. It felt great to be outside again, breathing in the fresh air while digging into the soil. Gardening had always been a hobby of mine, something I'd enjoyed for years. As the sun started to set, and I wiped the sweat from my forehead, a strange feeling came over me. I suddenly felt the urge to check on Ben. It wasn't like I needed anything from him, but for some reason, he was on my mind. The thought of him lingered, nagging at me in a way I couldn't ignore. I brushed the dirt off my hands, grabbed a rag, and made my way to his house just a few doors down. When I knocked on his door, I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe just a casual chat, a simple exchange like the ones we'd had before. But the moment Ben opened the door, I knew something was off. His eyes seemed darker. His usual easy smile wasn't as sure. "Martha," he said, his voice carrying a trace of surprise. "Hey, what's up?" I replied, hesitating for a second. "I was just thinking about you." The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I immediately felt a bit awkward. "I just want to check in, see how you're doing." Ben stepped back slightly, motioning for me to come inside. "I'm fine, just working on a few things around the house," he said as he led me to the living room. But there was something in his tone, something tense, guarded. I could tell he wasn't really fine. We sat down and made small talk for a while, chatting about the neighbors, the weather, the usual things. But there was an energy between us that hadn't been there before. The air felt heavier, as if something unspoken hung between us, just out of reach. After a long pause, Ben suddenly leaned forward, his deep, searching eyes locking onto mine. "Martha," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something that's been on my mind for a while." My heart skipped a beat. The shift in his tone caught me off guard. This wasn't the easygoing Ben I was used to. This was someone with something serious to say. "I've been thinking about us," he continued, his voice calm, but carrying a quiet intensity. "About the way things have been. And I can't shake the feeling that there's something more between us. I know we haven't known each other that long, but I don't want to ignore this. I think there's something real here." The connection between us was more than just lending a helping hand. It was something deeper. I sat there, frozen for a moment, as his words hit me hard. Not in a bad way, but like a truth I had been avoiding had finally surfaced. Everything swirling in my mind suddenly made sense. My heart raced, my thoughts tangled, unsure of what to do next. Ben had laid it all out, and now the choice was mine. I never saw this coming, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I mean, I wasn't looking for anything like this. I've been through so much. I don't know if I'm ready to open up like that. Ben nodded, his expression soft and understanding. "I get it, Martha. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel. This isn't just some passing thought. I care about you, more than I ever expected. And I think you feel something too, even if you're not ready to say it." His words hit me like a wave. Deep down, I had known it, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. I didn't know exactly what I felt, but I couldn't deny that something inside me had shifted. Something long buried was stirring again. Maybe it was just the simple feeling of being seen, of being understood. Or maybe it was something more, something that went beyond the occasional visit or thoughtful gesture. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I never thought I'd be in this place after everything. But Ben, I care about you too." "I do." A long silence settled between us. Ben didn't move, didn't speak right away. He just let my words sink in. Then, slowly, he reached out, his fingers warm and steady as they took mine. "I'm not asking for anything in return," he said gently. "I just want you to know I'm here. No matter what happens, you don't have to go through this alone anymore." And in that moment, something inside me changed. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the start of something real, something deeper than I had thought possible. For the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Ben had unlocked a door inside me, one I hadn't even realized was shut. It wasn't just about the help he had given me. It was about how he saw me, how he made me feel alive again, like I mattered. As we sat there, hands intertwined in the quiet of his living room, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. And more importantly, I didn't have to be afraid of what came next. The days after that conversation felt different. There was an unspoken shift between us. We spent more time together, not just tackling everyday tasks, but truly getting to know each other. We talked more, shared stories, and learned things about one another we hadn't before. It felt like something new was unfolding, something I never expected. Then, we had our first real date. It wasn't anything elaborate, just a simple dinner at the little bistro down the road, the same place I'd always gone for a quiet meal. Ben had offered to cook, but I had suggested we go out instead, just for a change of scenery. He agreed easily, but I could see the quiet satisfaction in his eyes, like he was pleased by my choice. Sitting across from each other at that small table, there was a natural ease between us, the kind of comfort that comes when two people genuinely enjoy each other's presence. We didn't need to fill the air with words. The laughter, the stolen glances, and the quiet understanding between us were more than enough. As the evening went on, I couldn't help but think about how we had gotten here, how unexpected it all was. My life had been completely turned upside down by a simple act of kindness. What I had once seen as just a neighbor had slowly become someone who meant more to me than I had ever imagined. After dinner, we took a walk. The cool night air wrapped around us as we strolled down the quiet streets. The distant hum of traffic was calming, the city lights flickering softly in the distance. We didn't say much, just enjoyed the silence together. But something in the air felt different, charged with a quiet possibility. "I'm glad we're doing this," Ben finally said, breaking the stillness. His voice was soft, sincere. "I know we haven't known each other for long, but I feel like we're building something real." I smiled, warmth spreading through me. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. There was truth in his voice. He wasn't just speaking to fill the silence. He meant every word. I feel the same way, I said, my voice softer than before, but steady. And in that moment I knew, whatever this was, whatever it could become, I wasn't facing it alone. I never saw any of this coming, but now that it's happening, I can't help but feel like it's exactly what I needed. I had been stuck in my own fears and regrets for so long, but you've shown me that life still has so much to offer. There's still time to find happiness, to connect with others, and to let myself be open again. Ben suddenly stopped walking and turned to face me. His hand reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was soft, reassuring. Martha, you don't have to be afraid anymore. No matter what happens, we'll figure out together. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. In that moment, a deep sense of peace washed over me. This wasn't the dramatic, fairy tale love story I had imagined when I was younger, but it was real. It was honest. It was built on something deeper, a quiet, steady bond that mattered more than anything grand ever could. The next few months felt like a blur of new experiences. More walks, more conversations, more moments of quiet understanding. Our connection grew stronger, built on the trust we had carefully nurtured. There were no sweeping declarations, no extravagant gestures, just a love that grew steadily, naturally, like it had always been meant to be. And then I realized something important. Love isn't always about grand moments or fireworks. Sometimes it's in the little things, the way someone listens, the way they make you feel truly heard and understood, the way they show up when you need them the most. Ben had done all of that for me in ways I never could have predicted. His patience, his kindness, his quiet strength. It all helped me heal in ways I never thought possible. One evening, we sat together in his living room, drinks in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon through the window. In that moment I knew, without a doubt, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I never thought I'd be here, I murmured, almost to myself. Ben smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I know, neither did I. But sometimes life takes us where we least expect, and we end up exactly where we need to be. That was when I truly understood. Ben's unexpected presence in my life had changed everything. He had given me a new way of seeing the world, a fresh appreciation for the quiet, steady kind of love that truly matters. It wasn't just him who had helped me heal. It was us together, learning how to be there for each other through both the small moments and the big ones. As I looked at him sitting beside me, I knew one thing for certain. Life wasn't about the grand, dramatic gestures. It was about the people who show up for you, day after day, helping you find yourself again. And in Ben, I had found that person. There was still so much to figure out, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face whatever came next, ready to move forward, knowing that I wasn't alone anymore. And that, I realized, was all I had ever truly needed.